Welcome to the Left Hemispheres podcast, the official podcast of lefthemispheres.com. You can find us on Gmail at lefthemispheres@gmail.com, Twitter at lefthemispheres. You can also find us on Google+. This week,
Wednesday, October 17th, 2012.
The last episode we have before Halloween, so we're going to talk about some woo-woo, spooky, ghosty stuff.
Yeah, towards the end here, we'll get through some of the news of the past week or two, and then we'll hit the Halloween stuff towards the end.
With me, as always, is Steve.
Hello.
And Adam.
Hello.
And Nick is once again unavailable.
We will have him back for the next episode, looks like.
Steve, what do you got this week?
The first article I wanted to bring up is about a 27-year-old man who cut off his own hands to prevent himself from stealing. This article comes from Information Nigeria. I randomly found this. I don't even know how I found this. Shockingly, it's from a Islamic country. The article's from Nigeria, I guess, but the man, Ali Afifi, is Egyptian. And apparently he could not stop himself from stealing, so he followed an Islamic scholar's advice to help him repent and seek God's help. So he cut off both of his hands. And there's a rather disturbing picture of him on this article with no hands. Apparently he's very happy about this. He cut off the other hand to make sure he would never steal again. This is just crazy. I mean, he did. Of course, he thinks he's in a pitched battle with the devil. Just religious, absolute nonsense. And the thought I had about this is sort of a take on another meme I saw. But, cutting off your hands is not normal, but on religion it is. I just don't understand how anybody, even in Islamic society, would find this acceptable. Kind of a desperate act by someone who maybe has a mental disorder. And that might...
Maybe?
It's probably true, but what my point being is that this is found acceptable.
That it's found as an acceptable treatment is the problem.
Right. I mean, he was advised by an Islamic scholar, and they have all the authority in the world. But, it's sort of like regardless of his mental state, to commit such an act doesn't excuse religion's culpability in this. I mean, obviously someone told him to do it, and it was a religious, leader. But the religion is the rationalization that allows such a behavior to go on without being questioned.
It's worth mentioning just for the imagery that he did this by going to a train station and basically putting his hands on the rails as the train went by in front of hundreds of people. This was not something that was done gently. I mean, it was just from the psychological action of, like there's a gentle way to chop your hands off, but still it was such a powerfully violent action. It clearly comes from a really deep mental disorder. This man is certainly not well, and he still seems to be surrounded by religious leaders because that was his thought process. So he still isn't getting help.
His father, I guess, he cut off one of his hands with this train incident, and his father sent him to an asylum. And then after he left, he sought the help of an Islamic scholar to assist in chopping off the other wrist. But I guess to the Islamic scholar's credit, he refused, citing he was not a ruler nor in the position to make that decision, and he should repent and seek God's help. So he did it again by himself. It doesn't really state how he did it the second time. So I should correct that and retract it. He was not told.
It starts off, the first line is, according to the Bible, if your eyes lead you to sin, pluck it out. And then it says that's exactly what this person did, but then they're stating that he's a Muslim. I think that the problem is the article is all it's very misleading and it's terrible. Yeah. It's just messed up.
Honestly, I think we should just cut this whole part out. To tell the truth. This article's not really relevant. I misread that one paragraph.
And that throws the whole thing off.
Yeah, it really does.
And I did too, because it's not linear.
No, it is. I mean, I don't know if it's an English translation problem. There's plenty of, all the comments are in English.
But it looks like a lot of the comments are about other comments. I think there's the original article that had comments on it, and somebody put it on Facebook.
Because it's done through that awful Facebook commenting system. You ever read an article that's got Facebook commenting and everything's disjointed and it's all fucked up? So let's just strike this whole fucking thing because this is
fair enough. Well, we can very easily start off with the Sam Harris thing.
So there was the Newsweek article, Heaven is Real, about a neurosurgeon's experience of going to heaven after he was laid up in a coma, where he saw angels, clouds, departed relatives, but also butterflies and beautiful girls in peasant dress. I mean, hey.
It's not heaven if there's not girls, right?
What's not to like?
You know it.
So this has been picked up by the mainstream media, of course, and it's in Newsweek, for fuck's sake. And so Sam Harris has his rebuttal to this called This Must Be Heaven, where he outlines how little this neurosurgeon must know about how the brain works. At one point, Sam Harris says he pretty much just cuts brains for a living, but must not really understand how they work neurologically. For him to just be completely devoid of the experiences of the mind in certain situations. I guess the doctor explicitly stated that, it wasn't like any hallucination that he's ever heard of. Sam Harris counters this by saying, this for all the world sounds like a DMT trip, which Sam Harris is not shy about discussing his, past drug use and, how he experimented with drugs and actually when he was younger, and it kind of propelled him into his study of the brain in a lot of ways. But he completely lays this guy's account bare just as an awful, awful rationalization of what happened to him and just fixating on basically the cultural narrative of what he experienced. The doctor already comes into this with the typical, I considered myself a faithful Christian.
But I wasn't really a Christian.
Going in.
Yeah, but he wasn't really, he wasn't a good Christian or wasn't a real Christian, in his own words, basically.
After the fact, looking back in hindsight.
Yeah.
After having this revelation, he wasn't a true Christian before having it.
Yeah, and he does that type of thing. But as a scientist, I simply knew better than to believe them myself about his, hallucinations. Why can't I say that word? He doesn't seem to really understand anything about how the human brain works. I mean, I read the article before Sam Harris did this rebuttal, and I mean, I don't know jack shit about how the brain works compared to Harris. Not in any stretch of the imagination, but none of this really was like any surprise to me. The things that he described. Now, it's extremely vivid.
I do appreciate Harris's comparison there, because it's kind of like it's almost like Sam Harris is saying you claim to be an engineer, but you're really just a mechanic.
Yeah, that's his analogy basically. I mean, he doesn't use that, but about him, but the doctor must not really understand anything about how the brain works. He just cuts them for a living.
One of the things that Sam even says too is that DMT already exists in the brain as a neurotransmitter.
Yeah.
So and it's even possible under the scenario. And of course, Harris doesn't say that he knows any of this for sure. He's just speculating at this point that he could have actually received, ketamine, for example, which is another hallucinogen. While in the hospital, or like his brain could have released DMT into his system.
Yeah, could have dumped it.
And one thing that is pretty clear about brain states is that time doesn't really matter, and any more than time matters when you fall asleep for 5 minutes and you have what feels like an hour and a half long dream. Mm-hmm. And you just go watch Inception. So it doesn't mean that there was any length of time, and it seems like although this guy talks about time moving in strange ways during his hallucination, he still seems to fixate on knowing exactly at which point in his near-death experience he had all of these hallucinations, which isn't even remotely possible for him to be conscious of time outside of his body while having this timeless hallucination on the inside.
No, that's completely problematic for his own credibility in being able to state how he perceived time.
Absolutely.
His inability to be able to
his inability to separate his experience or his perception of his experience from what he knows as a scientist.
Right, and his preconceptions. Sam Harris just smacks him down. The guy's talking about being in a coma and how his cortical activity, was nil, if at all. And Sam Harris blatantly states coma is not associated with the complete cessation of cortical activity in any case. And to his knowledge, almost no one thinks that consciousness is purely a matter of cortical activity regardless. And, the Dr. Alexander is basically saying this, and this happened, and he himself has no evidence that his cortical activity shut down or what that would even mean, how long it all really took. And as Adam brought up, Harris points out, he doesn't know what he received, as possible stimulants or whatever during this, his coma. So it's the whole Occam's razor. All things being equal, what's more likely? That his brain was just firing off crazy, or that he really disassociated himself from his body through the universe cosmic and experienced what heaven is like. And it's oddly exactly like
he was
a
taught.
Disney movie. It's a fucking Disney movie.
Here's the thing about hallucinations. With this, I mean, the same way that language dictates thoughts, your hallucinations are dictated by your previously held beliefs. Fortunately or unfortunately, I've witnessed people having hallucinations a number of times. I've heard about it, I've read about it, I've researched it. You don't have a major hallucination that's counter to your belief system. Like a Muslim doesn't hallucinate Vishnu, okay? Buddhists don't hallucinate angels and demons. It just doesn't happen. When you have, and the same with actual near-death experiences, when people talk about dying and going to heaven, it's always very clearly the paradigm and the narrative that they already believe. This even actually reminds me of that other book that's a bestseller, the Heaven is for Real. The 4-year-old kid dies and comes back to life, or has a near-death experience. His father's a pastor. I just had this conversation with somebody who was saying, like, well, what about all those accounts of people who died and come back? What about that 4-year-old kid? Well, his father was a pastor. He died, he came back, or he lost consciousness, or whatever it was. He came back, and somebody said to him, Did you see Jesus? He said, Of course, I sat on his lap while angels sang to me. Like, yeah, you fill somebody's head with images, and then you give them this kind of sensory, neurostatic of all these kind of jumbled thoughts and images and feelings, and you ask them to interpret it later. What are the chances that they're not going to interpret it along with a narrative that adds all of those aspects to it? I mean, it's just, it seems like the most logical explanation. It seems like Occam's razor, that you're going to take the narrative that works for you. If you have a dream where you're in the North Pole and you hear sleigh bells, you're going to think of the first myth that goes along with that. It's just the way that the brain works.
In the defense of the
favorable,
and the most favorable interpretation of that would be Leary's concept of self-transforming machine elves, right? Like, they only look like Jesus because you're expecting Jesus.
Right.
But yeah, this guy has this idea of what perfect heaven and what the afterlife, what he really wants it to be. What, hey, it doesn't sound so bad. As long as I don't have to worship anybody, I don't think it sounds all that bad myself.
Giant butterflies would creep me out.
The angels are arcs of light in the sky. I think that word is probably fairly accurate to call them angels. Well, shit, man, I've seen arcs of light in the sky on various occasions, sober, not sober, whatever. I'd never attributed them to angels. That's an implanted idea that your brain, like as Adam said, your brain's just going to jump to that.
Well, I mean, my whole thing about a case like this, end result, what is their belief system? Because you have somebody like this who goes through this kind of situation and can come out with kind of a we are all one, peace, love, or they can adopt the standard Christian narrative, which is a problem. Like, I mean, if this guy says, yes, I'm a Christian and I don't care if 2 dudes marry, fine, whatever, I don't care. Ostensibly, Bill Hicks was a religious guy,
Mm-hmm.
fine because he wasn't causing anybody any problems.
No, and he wasn't. For whatever religion he had, it wasn't.
It was fantastically personal.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It was personal. It was not. You can't. He was very much against the pretty much authoritative narrative of what Christianity or any other religion was. I think I'd be confident to state that he thought that was all bullshit. He made fun of it enough.
Yeah.
He certainly made fun of it enough.
That was an interesting discussion I got into after the debates last night. This Republican person had started criticizing the debate structure and started complaining about the women in binders meme.
Yeah.
and said something like, well, no, I mean, it's just people picking up on an odd phrase, taking it out of context and making jokes about it. People could do that about Obama too, but they don't. It's like, so your assertion is that Republicans are less funny than Democrats. That's what you're saying, because that's a little unfair to Bob Hope. But other than that,
well, I think they are less funny because they generally can't take they take themselves way too seriously. I saw the same complaints about the binder full of women and previously the Big Bird. So you're going to cut PBS, which is just an infinitesimal fraction of the budget, which will accomplish absolutely nothing, and yet the DoD budget will be untouched, if not inflated. Even
it's like one aircraft carrier for all of.
It's not. It doesn't even. Not even fucking close, man. I don't even. Yeah, it's not even close. And as far as the binders full of women thing, I don't know, man. That just kind of the more important thing about his comments there to me were, I think it was preceding that. He said, "If we're gonna have women in the workplace."
if
and I'm sure it's informed by his Mormonism.
Probably
ideas about how women should behave and act in their place in society. And so it's taking, this one little thing and blowing it up to shed light on how out of fucking touch the man is. And you could do the same thing with Obama, but, go ahead and try. And I got plenty of things that I rail against Obama for. But it's not nearly as blatantly stupid. I mean, it's the policy issues I have with the man and moral issues I have with Obama as well, but they're not of the same caliber of fucking silliness that the conservatives go through. I mean, they're stuck in the backwards age. They want to return to some utopian Americana that never fucking existed. And to pick on them is patriotic, quite frankly. No, it just
no. I agree.
They can't. They take themselves way too seriously. That's why they can't make a good joke or meme about Obama. Everyone you see is just either racist or stupid. It's just not funny. If it was funny, I'd fucking share it.
It might be also that maybe they just don't understand the internet as well, and they just don't know how short the meme is.
I think that the internet is largely owned by leftists to use.
Godless liberals, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing, and that's the reason that there was 16 of those memes within the first 10 minutes after the debate was over.
The binders full of women Tumblr within 10 minutes.
Yeah,
within 10 minutes. Love the internet. I just love the internet and its ability to react so fast in such a useful and antagonistic and comedic way.
Yeah.
I really think it's the best thing we've done as a society.
But I guess I'll just close on the Sam Harris thing. Basically, Harris points out, which I think is the most important thing about this, regardless of what the man thinks he saw, what he says he saw, and the rationality of that, the likelihood of it. He's trying to use his authority as a scientist, quote unquote, to say that, look, I am a scientist and I think this was heaven. It's an argument from authority yet again, when Harris breaks down the completely unscientific ways that this man is talking about things, which is the main point of Harris's article. I mean, he makes some good, funny jabs at the guy, but overall, he's not dismissing the possibility so much as this isn't it because of X, Y, and Z. And he lists it. I think he does a really good job. Not every, I like Sam Harris. Not everything he writes is good. Obviously, the whole airport security thing, I publicly disagreed with him. Not that I'm anybody, but so I'm not sucking at the teat of Sam Harris. Horrifying imagery for you. But he goes through here and just dismantles the man's argument from authority, which is Harris's main point.
Something I just want to throw in, just to add to that, is that the way that the actual brain works is that it fills in spaces. I mean, that's what it does for virtually everything. If you look at an object, the first thing you see is the shape, and then you fill in the color. Just as far as the way that the perception works. When you ever look at one of those internet messages where it's a series of sentences that are written in all numbers, but the numbers vaguely resemble alphabetical letters.
Right.
So, but even though you're looking at the numbers, you still fill in the blanks. So you can read a sentence where they take all the vowels out, and you can still understand what it is.
A completely jumbled sentence.
Yeah,
right.
where they keep the first and last letter of each word the same, but they scramble all the letters.
Right.
Yeah, I could read those things as if there's no difference.
Yeah.
Right, because the way that people read is that you don't actually look at all the letters and put them together. You skip over them, and you take sections, and your brain fills in the blanks. There's a blind spot in the human eye, and when you turn your head from one way to the other, you don't see it because your brain fills in the space. Mm-hmm. This is how brains work. It's the economy of our brain activity.
Yeah, that's also a good point as to why the eye isn't fucking perfect.
Right, because it doesn't need to be, no. and that's the whole point. Is that when you're conscious and lucid, if your brain still fills in the blanks all day long of all the sensory information that's coming in, then when you eliminate all the external stimuli and all you have is a crazy brain state and some random firing or misfiring neurotransmitters, your brain is still going to do what it always does and fill in the spaces.
Yeah, by this guy's logic, dreams can have meaning in a lot of ways. I mean, your brain's kind of half shut off. It's filling in blanks during the day. One of the theories about dreams is that it's just basically filing.
Yeah, I generally think of it as defragging.
Yes.
Well, that would be, I mean, it would be basically the same thing. It's rearranging memories, rearranging information, and your subconscious is doing the best thing it can in order to make that make sense. Now, we don't know why it would even bother. I don't. I mean, somebody might. I don't. I sure as shit don't. I haven't read up on it that much, but I'm just by this guy's logic, partial or inactivity of the brain would, in all cases, equate some kind of deeper meaning, which I'm sure if you really pressed him on it, he wouldn't.
Well, no, because I mean, if you really believe that in earnest, you just bash yourself over the head with a hammer.
Yeah.
That would be like your end goal.
So, well, okay, so say some guy that's Muslim is in a coma and comes out saying he went and met Allah and got his 72 virgins. Is Dr. Alexander going to accept his account as truthful? And what if he explains everything almost identical except for it's a completely Islamic narrative?
Or an alien abduction story.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, all these things are whatever your mind is primed for.
And there's cultural narratives to describe and explain all of them.
Well, that's what's filling the blanks in.
Right.
As you said. I'm just saying, like, he's not going to accept any other narrative except his own and the one that's familiar to him culturally.
Moving on. What is this Big Bang and religion mixed in CERN?
Fucking pissed me off. So CERN scientists have invited theologians and philosophers to partake in a debate style or a conference in the wake of the Higgs boson discovery and what that means. I would really, really, really like to know, since I don't trust any major news source or any news source for that matter, having been on the receiving end of being horribly misquoted in the paper for my real job, because everybody fucks up archaeology. The CERN scientists have invited theologians and philosophers to discuss the ramifications of what the Higgs boson discovery means. And the quote in here that made my brain boil was, co-organizer, Canon Dr. Gary Wilton, the Archbishop of Canterbury's representative in Brussels, said that the Higgs boson particle, quote, raised lots of questions about the origins of the universe that scientists alone can't answer. When has faith and religion been able to answer a single question about the universe in any capacity that science hasn't already discovered, and then they just kind of leapfrog?
Then they point to the next gap.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's basically yet another God of the gaps argument. Why I say I would really like to know, I just, like, are they inviting them to basically give them the old fucking scientific smackdown, or is it just to play nice? Is it some kind of political thing because of funding? Who the hell knows?
It probably is. I mean, you're talking about the Archbishop of Canterbury's representative in Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is Belgium one of those countries that has a state church? I don't know why there's an Archbishop of Canterbury's representative in Brussels. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But that's something else entirely.
Yeah,
that's pure politics.
Yeah, whatever.
The way that I see this, it's just one of those, non-overlapping magisteria.
Damn
it! Never get that right. Non-overlapping magisteria of just the ongoing debate between science and religion, and I think this is their olive branch for something that they know is so very sensitive to religious people, and because obviously, although the scientists are probably a high percentage of them are probably agnostic or atheist, they still recognize that the vast majority of the population that they're trying to communicate this information to is just very sensitive about it. So I'm thinking this is one of those things where we reach out, we all talk about it, we open the gates for the philosophical and the religious conversation, and that everybody can go home thinking that you don't need to kill us all in our sleep or cut our funding or whatever. I think this is the olive branch so that they can continue to.
Well, yeah, it's purely political.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Another quote I wanted to bring here, Professor John Lennox of Oxford. They have to put this in here randomly. I thought he's been an outspoken critic of, quote, atheist scientists, unquote.
Right.
I don't know why the BBC felt the need to put that in there, because they're not quoting him. That's the BBC putting that atheist scientist, like he's outspoken critic of. Then they do quote him countering Stephen Hawking, his assertion that God did not create the universe. And Lennox says, when Hawking argues in support of his theory of spontaneous creation that it was only necessary for the blue touch paper to be lit to set the universe going, the question must be, where did this blue touch paper come from, and who lit it if not God? Where it's so cliche, but so many people just don't think of it.
Prime mover argument, or
prime mover argument. If who lit it if not God? Well, who lit God? The argument is used so often. It's mind-boggling to me.
It's just assigning agency.
I know.
I don't know, therefore God.
Yeah.
I know. You wrote a great article about that before. But what bothers me, or boggles my mind, I should say, of course it bothers me. I just can't believe that they keep using it.
It works because it resonates with people. It touches on their fears. It touches on the childhood rustle in the trees, and what's that sound and how does that work? And when my sister told me that a tape recorder was actually a little guy in there and his name was Mike because it said MIC on the little button there, and he was in there repeating whatever you said when you recorded it, that made more sense to me than that there was a machine. It's just we assign agency. Mm-hmm. And this is just another one of those things where we say, well, here's the part of this entire narrative that we don't have any explanation for, so let's as Steve has said, just stuff our throbbing God into that gap.
Someone pointed out what created God, and don't say he's always been there. That's meaningless. And so a reply to that was, maybe we are incapable of understanding. A cat probably doesn't understand trigonometry. We may be cleverer, but just suppose that we are physically unable to understand a time without the universe. Time, God, and existence are just words we created for our own brains to use to describe complex things. That's special pleading.
And if you've ever
again, it just goes right back to the God of the gaps.
A cat chase a moth, They can do trigonometry. They just can't do it consciously.
They just don't have thumbs to write it down.
Well, not even that. I mean, you couldn't. Cat's not gonna be able to explain math, but if they see a moth start to move, they know where that moth is gonna go, and that's trig.
Dude, thankfully, because if cats understood trig, we'd all be fucking dead.
Because they are far superior to us in many other ways.
More likely slaves, as much more than we already are.
Moving on to our favorite topic of all.
Yeah.
Blasphemy.
This is continued from the last podcast.
I'm so sick of blasphemy. Can I just say that?
You're sick
I'm so goddamn tired of blasphemy.
I'm sick of it being an issue. But there's surprisingly for the Washington Post, a decent article called "Shut Up and Play Nice: How the Western World is Limiting Free Speech." And it's just touching on what we had talked about before. We've, as a blog and as a podcast, have discussed basically the inability of Western society to kind of face up to what blasphemy is, and the what free speech really is. And in many ways, it's liberals' fault. I can't say that I would blame conservatives for this kind of relativism, because they don't have it. However, at the same time, they have the opposite for the wrong reason.
Yeah, relativism is the lesser of two evils against certainty.
The quote that really, got me going on this again was, such efforts focused not on the right to speak, but on the possible reaction to speech, a fundamental change in the treatment of free speech in the West. And I mean, this kind of gets to the heart of it in some ways, that people aren't, they're not really afraid of what someone's saying. They're afraid of what the offended is going to do about it, which is a very backwards way of thinking about and dealing with the concept of free speech, and in this case, blasphemy. Because blasphemy is just a free speech issue. There's nothing to be harmed in, blasphemy. I mean, people think there is, but come on.
In reality, all you're doing is you're hurting the feelings of the people who hear it.
Right. And
even at the even if all their suppositions about their faith are true, the only one you're hurting is yourself. Right?
Yeah,
if the Christian God exists, saying I deny the Holy Spirit only affects you, not the person who hears you say it.
Right. It's projecting. They think they know better. They think they're speaking for their deity, which is a completely arrogant thing to do.
Oh, God.
Just once again. But my focus on this is less on the people that are offended, at least in this one, and more on the people that are afraid of offending. They're afraid of the reaction of people that are going to be offended, when that is, to me, fundamentally defeatist. Why the fuck is somebody getting so bent out of shape over words? And you can parse this out into hate speech and bullying. I mean, I'm not devoid of the consequences of certain speech, but in the case of blasphemy and most free speech, even I hate the fucking KKK and neo-Nazis and all those fucking scumbags, but to shut them up, I think, is worse, because they dig their own grave.
I do not have a problem with the Klan marching right down the street in front of my house.
Mm-hmm.
Dude,
We'll stand
if I
outside.
were you, I'd dress up as one of them and go along.
Oh, that would be hysterical. But they have every right to do that, the same way that I have a right to hold up a sign as they march past, saying, "You guys are fucking idiots."
Exactly.
Like, that's how it works. It works both ways. The point of freedom of speech is to protect unpopular speech. But this whole thing with regard to the fear of what they're going to do, the fear of the reaction the reaction to the speech as opposed to the actual speech. The biggest problem with this is that there's no goalpost. There's no line. I mean, clearly non-Muslims in this case don't have any real sense of what is offensive and what isn't, because we can't use our own sensibilities. We can't use our own manners. You know what I mean? We can't any of our own cultural norms for what's offensive. It just doesn't work. And how many people really believe that if we take down that, if that the Innocence of Muslims trailer gets removed from YouTube, that there isn't going to be something equally offensive at some other venue?
There will be.
Right. And here's the thing: is that whatever that thing is, it could be less offensive than this particular movie trailer. It's just like the atheist billboards. The most bland, vanilla, stop worrying. There's probably isn't a God. Stop worrying and live your life. People lost their shit over that.
Well, Justin Bakula up in Scranton did the bus billboard where he just nothing but the word atheist. It's absurd. It's patently absurd. But your point being that where does it end? Because somebody is always offended. There's always people just fucking look to be offended. They do. What am I going to get pissed off about next?
Right. And it's if this one thing, and not like it is really one thing, but if speech becomes censored, even self-censored, more than it already is, because we're a politically correct society in general. It's only a few steps away from the next thing that's less offensive than the last thing that they still get just as offended at. And basically the only end result is for them to dominate the entire world. That's really
speech will just be curtailed and curtailed and curtailed.
Right.
And so nobody can be offended by anything, and we basically live and leave it to Beaver.
Or until it goes in the completely even further direction, and then it's thought crime. Then you didn't say it, but you meant to say it.
Right.
To think of how many people are literally chained to that idea.
Mm-hmm.
It must be horrifying.
That's the entire jingoist premise of the far right now.
Yeah.
You do this, you don't love America enough.
Mm-hmm.
As if that has some, bearing on what our rank is in education. It doesn't.
Yeah. Or, as if they have a hold on what patriotism entails, if you even want to call it that. The difference between patriotism and nationalism and jingoism and...
They make that claim, though, right? They say that if you don't think that America is the greatest country in the world, then you're unpatriotic. But
you reject American exceptionalism, as we all do. I think we brought it up maybe the first episode. We'd find it repulsive. Mm-hmm. Then you are not a real American. Well,
I believe it's pronounced American.
Yeah, American Jesus. But segueing to the next one, piss poor segue into the next one. Muslims protest the age of mockery as thousands descend on Google's headquarters, and I believe that's in London.
Yes.
And the choice quote from here is, "This is not freedom of expression. There is a limit for that. The insult of the prophet will not be allowed." I really didn't have anything else to say. I just wanted to say that quote.
Yeah, well, that pretty much sums it up.
It pretty much sums it up.
Well, that's the thing that we were talking about last time, about how the entire point of them not being able to show Muhammad is to avoid him becoming an idol. And yet...
I like that in this article you have these signs of Muslims campaign for global civility.
Tell that to Muhammad.
Right? It's just, freedom to insult. And, has, what was the one, like, how dare you insult the blessed Prophet Muhammad, or Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him, of course. Peace, by the way, be upon him. Because I think we need a little bit more here. It never ends. And it won't.
They really don't understand the concept of freedom of speech. Which, is sort of a broad... I don't
think they understand the context of freedom of speech, especially not in terms of the internet. I mean,
no.
If you got a group of people protesting Google and YouTube to ban something on the internet, there's a fundamental lack of understanding of how the internet functions. I mean, that is the kind of thing that trolls thrive on.
I know. I hesitate to paint with broad brush strokes. That seems to be true in most cases outside of the U.S. I mean, even in Europe, Muslims just get riled up about shit. That doesn't happen here. It really doesn't.
That's true.
there was none of that bullshit going on during the Innocence of Muslims things, in the heavily, granted, it's such a small percentage, but I mean, there's communities that are, a lot, there's like Dearborn, Michigan's famous for having such a large Muslim population, and there's others. But there was none of that bullshit going on here. I really honestly can't explain it except for maybe they actually understand the concept of freedom of speech here. The type of person that put that video up doesn't fucking represent anybody except for a very small minority of yahoos on their other side of the fucking coin. Which is the other thing. I just don't understand, like Jack's saying, how the internet works and how people purposely fucking troll people. So finally on the blasphemy thing, we'll get off this horse. We have anti-blasphemy laws, Pakistan, Greece, and Australia by our friend Martin Preble. And he wrote, the fear that he has is that anti-blasphemy laws, even if given as an edict from the UN, will be used and abused by people for their own ends, be they personal squabbles, political ambitions, or religious xenophobia, which seems fairly obvious. It's a pretty good point to point out. Probably end up being a lot like
McCarthyism?
Yeah, McCarthyism. I was going to use the communist Soviet, ratting out their neighbors basically just because they don't like them, saying that they're really not communist-y enough. Using blasphemy is just basically a means to silence, for those in power to silence those without. And in most parts of the world, those with power are religious. And obviously we are a minority as non-believers. And some places more so than others, and in some places obviously much more detrimental to your health and well-being. It's a tool of religious privilege to silence any dissent, criticism, protest. You could start using it in so many different cases, as we see with fundamentalist Christians in America, sort of on the same vein of what Jack brought up earlier about not being patriotic enough or not loving America enough. Especially in this context, since they think, wrongly, that this is a Christian country founded on Christian values, with a mandate from God. So in many of them, especially among the dominionist mindset, to deny that is blasphemy. To deny that is to be work of Satan. So don't think it would happen here, but it could easily be used.
I don't know. I mean, if you look at what goes on with I think it manifests itself in U.S. politics right now, most notably in the insurance contraceptive discussion. All of a sudden, they're making this, religious issue out of whether or not health insurance covers certain drugs, which is exactly what you're talking about, how it can be used in any which way to justify just about any position that you really wanted to.
Right.
Let's talk about Halloween, though. Halloween is coming up.
Yay!
It's my favorite season, and it just happens to be the holiday in the middle of the season, so I have to.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it gets shitty cold.
Well, see,
don't you miss dead leaves?
I do miss the leaves a little bit. Fall has gotten very weird out here, especially since we don't do daylight savings time.
Yeah.
Like, it gets dark. So the weirdest thing about it is that it still gets dark really early, but it's not cold. Yeah, and it still just messes me up when it's dark at 6 o'clock and I'm still wearing shorts. It just doesn't make sense.
No.
I can't process it.
No, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what you're talking.
That's just blasphemy.
I don't like it. I'm offended, sir.
That can't be. It's not really 6 o'clock. In God's time, it's...
It doesn't fit with my previously held ideology, therefore the reality must be false.
So on the top 5 Halloween myths debunked, Jack?
Yeah, I think that this article is wonderful. I think there's a lot of stuff in here that just needs to be said. They start off with, pure logic concludes that real vampires are impossible. And I love the logic of this argument, where they say that, if the first vampire came to be on January 1st of 1600, and the human population was about 536 million, and every day they bit one, and somebody else became a vampire, and that extrapolated exponentially, there would be no humans left by now.
Even if our species doubled each month.
Yeah.
Which he throws in there.
Which is actually there's a similar argument for against spacefaring intelligent life in the universe.
Yeah.
Consuming almond joys and other Halloween chocolates does not ward off cancer.
I'd never heard of this.
Neither had I. But I understand the premise of it. I mean, they know that there are antioxidants in chocolates and almonds and coconuts. So you put that all together, and there's something about it that almost makes sense, but not in any actual quantity that matters.
I can just see people just shoving their faces full of Americans shoving their faces full of almond joys, like looking like fat bastard. I have no cancer. And they die of diabetes 6 months later.
And then have a cigarette.
Yeah, that was excellent.
You have a better chance of being hit by a car on a dark street than finding secret razor blades in candies.
Yeah, now this one I knew about. I had read about this multiple times, that there have only ever been 2 confirmed cases of children being killed by poisoned Halloween candy. And both were cases where the kids were sadly intentionally killed by one of their parents. I remember this. I don't know, Jack, you and I trick-or-treated a lot when we were little kids together.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember our parents like, oh, that's a candy apple? Throw that shit away.
Yeah, right? And that was in our neighborhood. I mean, we knew everybody. It wasn't a big place.
I remember my mother cutting Starbursts in half with a knife to make sure that there weren't any little tiny pins in them.
No, I remember my mom doing that. We would get home. My brother and I were not allowed to eat anything until my mom went through everything with a knife. She would cut everything open and be like, this is safe, eat this half. This is safe, eat this half. It's I remember getting older and reading basically this statistic that it's really never happened. Being kind of blown away by it because I remember it so many years consecutively. I mean, it's actually part of our childhood.
This reminds me very much of that trend in the 80s where people thought that there were satanic cults everywhere.
That's exactly what I was going to just
bring up. And just like the Dungeons and Dragons, and that there were just cults everywhere. There was just Satan at every corner.
Well, that was fundamentally centered in Pennsylvania. I mean, it radiated from there.
No, my mom worked for the DA in Wilkes-Barre during the late 80s, early 90s. I remember her giving me a folder. Now, granted, at the time, I was wearing all black heavy metal and had long hair, listening to Megadeth and all kinds of shit. And my mom handed me a big folder of stuff that she got from the DA's office about signs for the police to look out for satanic activity. And she was handing this to me because she thought it was hilariously stupid. She's like, I thought you'd be interested in this. I'm like 13, 14 years old. And it was just, I remember reading through this and like sitting there with her going, this is dumb. Nobody believes this crap. And she's like, I know, but they're so worried about it around here. But that was like a real thing, especially up in the Wyoming Valley, in Northeast PA. They were so freaked out about Satanists.
My mother was the PTA president, and I remember this being a thing that she would talk about all the time. It was part of their regular meetings, just talking about like kids playing records backwards and like the subliminal messages and all that other stuff. It was something that parents routinely brought up in PTA meetings.
Yeah. It just blows my mind because who the fuck listened to anything backwards? I didn't even have records. I had tapes. The only time I ever heard of anybody listening to something backwards is due to fucking Tipper Gore.
Right.
And that whole like Judas Priest, Twisted Sister, and surprisingly John Denver shooting her the fuck down. Remember, and Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
Oh, the whole.
And those are great, by the way. If you've never seen them, go watch them. They're on YouTube.
Oh yeah, you got to watch those those congressional hearings. What were they called? The PMRC, the Parents Resource Center. That's why we now have explicit lyrics tag.
Well, now let's be fair. I mean, how many people still buy CDs? I suppose that there's that little explicit tag on iTunes, but
does it exactly? I don't know.
Well, there is. Go ahead, look at our podcast. It's right next to it. It's a little red.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, our podcast has the explicit tag. Thank you, Tipper Gore. You fucking
Fucking just gonna say that.
Halloween won't save America's consumer crisis. There's another one I'm completely.
I have never heard of this.
Yeah, I had.
It seems like a very uncommercial holiday. I mean,
Other than selling candy and
candy and stupid ass costumes.
Yeah. And granted, costumes are now like somewhere between for my kid's costume was probably about $30, which seems a little bit expensive, but
yeah, we bought our little girl a costume, and she won't go anywhere fucking near it. And it's just a bumblebee, damn it. I asked her if she wanted to be a zombie, and she's like, yeah, but she won't go anywhere near the little bumblebee cute ass outfit. She's fucking petrified of it. She has no problem. Like, I have a zombie outfit with like latex, like the skin's ripped open, it's all gnarly looking, and she's like, she doesn't even blink at it. But the fucking bumblebee, she's petrified of. Definitely my kid.
Yeah. My son is waiting very impatiently to wear his ninja suit for the first time on Halloween, so then he can wear it every day after that.
Yeah, I can totally see him just kind of run around the neighborhood with that.
And the fifth one on this list was, there has not been a single case of a child being molested by a convicted sex offender while trick-or-treating. And between this one and the razor blades in the apples one, I like that they're debunking those, because there's been this kind of hypersensitivity in our culture that's kind of been closing people off and keeping people indoors, and I hate that.
You know what I hate? Halloween is now on the last Thursday of the month, regardless of what fucking day. So Halloween this year is on a Wednesday, right? Trick-or-treating around here is on the 25th, which is the Thursday prior. 6 fucking days beforehand. Which, to me, doesn't even make sense. If you're trying to keep kids not having a school day, why is it on a Thursday? If you're going to at least do that, do it on a Saturday. I'm just saying, I don't understand the logic. Just have it on Halloween.
Yeah, in my neighborhood, it's on Halloween. It always is.
How are the spirits supposed to come through the crack in dimensional shifting if it's not on actual Halloween? This pisses me off.
They fly on butterfly wings, Steve, so it's okay. There's calendars in heaven and arcs of light, and it all works out.
Calendars
which actually traces to one small mountain town in Mexico that on around the 31st or November 1st, when the monarch butterflies are passing through, that's where that entire thing stems from.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
That is cool.
A note on the sex offender thing, since, my little wheelhouse here.
Yeah.
As far as in just sex offenders in general, like if you're a convicted sex offender, obviously people who have not ever been caught are always going to be a threat. And usually what happens is they continue to take more and more chances and to abuse more and more children until they're caught. If that's, the thing that they do. That whole thing in the article about someone saying that's eventually that they're going to start killing children, it doesn't actually work that way. If you have a sexual urge, it's a sexual urge. It doesn't just turn into a murderous urge. It's human sexuality, and
too much Law and Order SVU.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
which is a fucking shit show, by the way. You shouldn't watch that, people.
If you're twisted enough to want to have sex with children, that's pretty much what you want to do. And that the book pretty much stops there. It doesn't necessarily have to go and get worse. But as far as actual sex offenders who have been released from treatment, they're actually less likely to reoffend if they have completed treatment than the ones who haven't been caught and haven't ever received any treatment. So chances are, if they are in your neighborhood and you got the whole Megan's Law thing, and you know that that's the sex offender's house, who obviously is part of their relapse prevention plan, they're not supposed to answer the door on Halloween anyway, very much less likely to be the ones who are going to just grab a child who trick-or-treats, in the Batman suit at their front door on a day when everybody in the neighborhood is out walking around the neighborhood,
I apologize for my extraordinarily inappropriate laugh there, but now I'm just thinking of anybody who doesn't answer their door on Halloween is a fucking sex offender.
Just because the lights are off, it's not because they forgot to get candy. It's because they're a sex offender.
Yeah, so you could just pretty much just egg the shit out of that house.
Right. Or at the very least, mark it down in your little neighborhood calendar or your neighborhood watch thing. Keep an eye on that fucker.
So, sorry, that was easy. When you said that,
as you just said, I mean, the statistical likelihood of that person being relapsing on Halloween is horribly unlikely.
Right. And if it's a person who actually stalks and hunts children, they're not going to pick the day when everyone is expecting it to happen. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I hate to.
No, they'll wait until the kid's in the confessional.
Oh, no. No, they'll wait till Black Friday at Target when it's elbow to elbow people and everybody's carrying a screaming child out under their arm. Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm forced to think about things like this all day long.
Well, the next thing on the list was the actual real threats, which aren't actually Halloween based.
It's just a really good fucking point.
Right. If you have people worried about these things that aren't actually true, like razor blades in the apples, and contrast that with the anti-vaccine movement, which is an actual problem and an actual threat to your kids.
Yeah.
Even if your kid is vaccinated, it's a threat to your kid.
Right, because of
little patient zero in the classroom sitting next to him.
But if you look at this website that I linked to this, it is horribly sneaky. The concept that this anti-vaccination group has a website called vaccinationcouncil.org.
Yeah, I think they're based out of Australia. I think it might have been Preble. I'm not sure. Somebody has taken these people to task for looking like a medical website because they have the
in a big way.
Yeah, this looks like a legit medical website. Opening it up, and they even have the little Hippocratic staff with the snake up there.
Only one snake, though.
That's true. Yeah,
it's very sneaky. No wings.
Fuckers.
Like, I don't know if this is probably something that neither of you guys notice because you don't pay attention to design a whole lot. But Mitt Romney's logo on all his campaign stuff, that kind of double blue red R.
Yeah.
Look up Romica Shoes. They're a German company. Their logo is his logo.
He stole it.
Pretty much.
He just outsourced that shit. What are you talking about?
That's the thing that bothers me. I mean,
he just outsourced it.
In my brain, guy makes $20 million a year, can't get a graphic designer to make him an original logo.
Dude, how the hell did you pick that out of fucking the internet? That you're right. That is, he jacked the last R.
Seriously. Yeah, we're way off topic here, but I just found that fascinating.
I just found it online.
Using design to give yourself a sense of legitimacy, right? Like, I mean, one of the things that particular shoe company makes women's shoes. Somewhere, some research guy sat down and said, if we use this, it appeals to women more than this other thing because they remember this logo that they saw in a store this one time. And that kind of thing drives me nuts.
It's fucking insane.
Yeah. That's marketing. And that's why those people are evil.
So on this International Medical Council on Vaccination page, some asshole is holding up a sign quoting Neil Young, "I've seen the needle and the damage done." And then it shows a picture, autism in New Jersey, 1 in 94. I'm just really annoyed that they abused Neil Young like that.
I take it entirely out of context.
Yeah, I know. That's heroin, you fucking morons. Which actually damages people. Fucking people. We had a couple week or two ago on the Left Hemispheres Facebook page, like it, we had someone who was from another atheist blog, actually, who I won't name for you, post something about basically anti-vax crap. I think Nick posted something that was anti-vaxxer, and this person posted something back, and then Nick just blew her apart.
Oh, that was funny.
Because that's something that Nick knows a lot about. And he even asked her various questions. I did too, even before Nick got to it. I texted him and said, dude, someone commented on your thing and they're an anti-vaxxer. He was the one who figured out they were from another blog, an atheist blog. I had no idea. I basically just said, hey, they were making all these claims. I said, cite your sources. If it's from Andrew, what was his name, Wakefield, it's bullshit. I don't know of anything that proves their point or even supports their point outside of his bullshit. And they didn't come back.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that's legitimately detrimental.
And then we move on to the next best thing. Prayer-based healthcare. Oh. Is that an actual term, or did you just make that up?
I just made that up. I think the actual term is faith healing.
Yes, and faith healing is upsetting in its own right, but prayer-based healthcare really is pretty accurate.
It really is.
I like that.
It's Romney's plan, I think.
And there are so many of these. I think it may have.
At least this one. This is one from September, about a month ago, where an Oregon couple was found guilty of manslaughter of their son for not getting him assistance.
And he had a burst appendix. Any idea how fucking painful that is?
That's horrifying.
Their kid died in just complete agony, and it was like a week and a half later. So he probably had a burst appendix for a week and a half.
Right, he probably went septic and he went into all kinds of bad things.
Yeah, my father-in-law had that happen, and he's described that to me. Actually, I brought this up, and he described what it was like to have a burst appendix, and he couldn't fathom. He couldn't fathom for the life of him living through all that for that long, and what the parents did. Yeah, this story's been brewing for a long time, and
the way to mock that is to equate it with pray the gay away, right?
That'd be one thing.
God did not make you with appendicitis. Having an appendicitis is a choice.
It's just, but see, how do they not think that the method that God would use to heal them would be by assisting the surgeons who remove the kid's burst appendix?
Well, that's the majority of Christians,
and that's kind of that mainstream,
which is just fucking ridiculous. But hey, at least it gets kids care.
Yeah, well, that's the same as guided evolution, right?
By supernatural selection,
right? If you want trademark, if you want to pray away your kid's sickness, you pray in the hospital waiting room like fucking everybody else. But hey, here's some fun stuff.
Yes, let's get back to more Halloween-based
hijinks,
spooky doom.
The Ouija board.
The Ouija board. I love the Ouija board because it's been debunked for so long, but people still. Parker Brothers makes it. Yeah, if this was a thing that could summon demons, do you think it would be mass-produced by a major game company?
I love that it's just been completely capitalized. There's the mysticism is gone, and it is just now
a way to separate fools from their money.
Yes. I did look up just briefly. We all have a general idea how it actually works, but the one of the running psychological theories is ideomotor action, or idiomotor action. That's it. And it's exactly what you think it is. You might not necessarily be conscious of the fact that you are moving the whatever that little triangle thing is called, but essentially, it's wish fulfillment. You're asking questions. You have a general idea what kind of answer you're looking for, and people are basically, especially now, you're going along for the ride. I found an article in Psychology Today, the Ouija board explained, and it's just kind of going through the whole thing of that people are essentially aware of what they're doing, at least to some degree. But when the Ouija board was popular, was before Sigmund Freud, when we really didn't have any idea that there was anything like an unconscious mind, and people just didn't have that kind of concept, and that's really where that a lot of that supernatural thing came to, that supernatural understanding of what it was really came to be. The best thing about this article is just the end of it making a suggestion that if you have one of those people who just firmly believes that there is a supernatural thing that's moving them around, says blindfold them and ask them some basic questions, and then somewhere in the midst of their they're moving the thing around, just turn the board
around. Yeah.
and just see if they've memorized where the letters and where the answers are, and see what kind of an answer you get.
Right, and it is self-perpetuating. Like, even if you have someone who is unconvinced but willing to accept the premise, once you get one little muscle movement one way or the other that they can't consciously account for, and it becomes a self-fulfilling thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you say to yourself, don't think of green, don't think of green, don't think of green.
Yeah.
So that's that. Then we have
hauntings.
Oh.
Hauntings. I love that there's an entire industry based around like paranormal tourism. I appreciate, because if I had a failing old hotel, the first thing I would say is that it was haunted.
Yeah.
This is a big industry. People pay good money to go on these ghost tours.
Right. And the thing that I love the most about it is that these paranormal investigators, who are just people with no particular training at all, put together these pseudo-scientific sounding experiments and tests and protocols. I have a list of protocols here from one group of them,
which is fantastic, by the way.
It's a great list. There's absolutely no smoking during an investigation. Okay, fine. No drinking of alcoholic beverages. All right. I guess that does cut down on you thinking you saw something that you didn't. Absolutely no use of Ouija boards, as if that matters.
Because you could scare them away.
Now, here's the best part, because remember, they're trying to get photographic evidence of paranormal phenomenon. So, we do not take photographs during adverse weather conditions. We do not take photos from moving vehicles because of the possibility of dust. Do not take photos while walking on dusty roads when in dusty conditions. They've eliminated every possible chance to take a picture. I mean, if you're in an old house, that is a dusty condition.
And let's just throw out there that you're trying to record visible light from something that presumably doesn't have any type of physical presence. I don't know. I got nothing.
I really, we have the Ghost Hunters.
I've never watched that show.
Neither have I, because, why would I?
Oh, it's horrible. They got this shaky, handy cam footage of people in the dark with a infrared filter, and there'll be like a knock, like a house settling noise, and like, did you hear that? Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's something here. And it's like, what the fuck, dude? You're in a house. It's quiet. Whatever.
My entire experience with this show is just on commercials, and I'm like, you fucking kidding me? I cannot believe, and it's still on the air after like 5 or 6 years. It's been on.
Now, I actually went to the following the link that you had, Jack, about the criteria for investigations, and when you look at some of the hauntings they've discovered, there's I think it's the Eastern State Penitentiary, which is actually relatively close to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually had recordings of, sounds they heard of people talking. And it's like, while we were having another conversation, you can hear this kind of vaguely audible whisper of somebody saying something else in the midst of our conversation. And you can't even hear the original conversation, let alone what you're supposed to be hearing out of it. But it's just like, here, listen to this.
And mind you, I mean,
Oh wow!
This other conversation that you're hearing in the background of the conversation that they're having in a penitentiary, which is all concrete, as if echoes don't happen.
Right.
It's just reactionary to random bullshit, and there's never any. They never show anything. It just perpetuates every episode, one non-event after another.
Right, and everybody who's on one of these shows or makes these claims, you just kind of want to be like, watch some Scooby-Doo.
Yeah,
it is never anything that noise you heard. Do that back. So, remember, kids, this Halloween, don't be afraid of the candy. Don't be afraid of the people giving you the candy.
If people don't answer the door, they're sexual predators.
If you eat the candy and you get sick and your parents try to pray over you instead of take you to the hospital, call someone.
I guess that's it.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening. You can contact us via lefthemispheres@gmail.com, on Facebook, Google+, or at Twitter at Left Hemispheres. Feel free to send us suggestions, comments, whatever. Please interact.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.